Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this post-viewing panel. I feel like we want to take the time to really have a Q&A. So I'm not going to go ahead. So my name is Eileen. I direct APSI, and we're very happy, along with ADS, Asian American Diaspora Studies, and to sponsor the screening. And we're also really delighted that we could convene such an interesting panel of folks who can speak directly to the film, but also to what the film's topic, which is really thinking about Asian Americans and mental health. So I mentioned to them earlier that since what they are talking about tonight is also what they do, so I'm not going to go and read their bios. I would rather they introduce themselves and maybe tell us a word or two of what they do in this space.
Thank you, Eileen. And so my name's Yan Li, and I'm an associate dean at the graduate school here at Duke. And so my training background is clinical psychology, so I'm a licensed psychologist. I came to the United States in 2002 as a graduate student, international student, and did my master's degree in counseling psychology, and then went on for my doctorate degree in counseling psychology. And so I came to Duke in 2008, and working as a psychologist at the counseling center here at Duke for 12 years, and then I went on to Duke University, Duke Quinsan DKU, Duke Quinsan University, and served as a director of the counseling center and built up the mental health system over there, and then serving different roles and supporting students. So in my space, and so I have worked with many, talking about in terms of Asian mental health, and certainly served many students in that capacity. And really, and then in the current role too, even though I'm not doing full-time clinical work, I have a small private practice, and so still kind of clinical work is my love, my passion. And when I work with students here on the campus, and still working with student behavior assessment team, and then supporting students, and so support their mental health, and working with faculty members and all the community, and provide that community support. So I'll stop here. Very nice to be here.
Okay, hello. Thank you. My name is Lily Chen. I'm the producer of the film, and also I am the mother of 5 children. One of them came here for 8 years. I asked her, do you have anything to say? She said, no, Mom. Okay. I said, that's what I'm going to say. I know it's getting late, so I think my main role as a mom is to really wanted to promote parent-child relationship, and because as an immigrant mother came here in 1988, I have experienced a lot of challenges as a mom, and also professionally, I'm a public health nurse educator. I teach at NCCU, and I'm also another more than a full-time job is that I am the executive director for United Chinese American WAVE Youth Mental Health Collaborative. That is exactly doing what the film is intended to do, which is increase the mental health knowledge, decrease the stigma, and promote parent-child relations to decrease youth suicide. So thank you so much for staying late.
Hi everyone, my name is Pooja Mehta. I have been working in the community mental health space for 10 years, actually, starting with founding the Namian campus here at Duke and my junior year of college. I'm currently the founder of Tarang, which is a community-led initiative supported by the State Division of Mental Health, specifically working in partnership with Asian American community groups across the state to make these communities spaces where people are equipped with the language and the resources to be able to have conversations about mental health, substance use, suicide with each other, and collectively as a community advocate for resources to be designed to meet the needs that they are facing.
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Lin Jing. I am currently a master student at UNC Chapel Hill studying clinical mental health counseling. But previously I came to the US in 2014 and I was actually a student at FZ, did my master's degree in East Asian Studies, then I worked at FZ, then I worked at now it's called Duke International Student Center, used to be called iHouse. So I think that the work there, like working with international students at Duke, really kind of prompted me to think more about the mental health and needs that in the communities and how like there's such a lack of therapists who look like us, who know about like the experiences of immigrants. So that really prompted me going into the mental health field. And in addition to my study, I have been also working with Lily, working with WAVES since I think earlier this year. So just doing like programming in North Carolina. So I'm very glad to be back at Duke and then to be, like have this film shown here and also join this panel.
Thank you all so much, and I want to especially thank Lily for producing this film. It was just really, really powerful, and I'm really glad that. But part of the power was also seeing the way the parents and children come to fashion new stories about their relationships with one another and to find new ways to talk about things that maybe they couldn't talk about. I think we should just open it up, but but I'll start off with a little question and feel free to incorporate it or we can just directly take more questions. So one of the things I think is really delicately balanced in this film is thinking about external circumstance as well as internal conditions, right? So, and sometimes it's really the confluence that being an immigrant is really sometimes a double whammy of as we saw in several of the families that and the film takes care to talk about COVID, China flu, anti-Asian hate, post-September 11, kind of especially Sikhs and Muslims, and South Asians getting a lot of, being victims of hate crime, or just a kind of more generalized, like I actually know the journalist, the very Asian lady. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle,
And
yeah.
Michelle had made a killing on the t-shirts, some of the merch. So turning something very kind of like, really insulting into a kind of moment of power, right? And so you have these externals of being Asian in America and maybe the kind of, external traumas or histories. But then I think also the story is careful to say, well, you have that, but you also have people like the father of Elaine, right? Mm-hmm. And, who carry with them neurological, chemical, psychological conditions. And so what is that confluence? Like, how did you all react to that particular kind of dialogue in the film and in these character stories?
So, so I came to this work because of my own lived experience. I was diagnosed with anxiety with auditory hallucinations when I was 15. And, for a very long time, I thought about mental health as this is a biological condition, this is a neurological condition, this is something that exists, it's a medical, clinical, what have you. And in my journey with my mental health condition, went to therapy, took medication, had my interactions with the legal system and the emergency system and all of that. And in that entire time, I felt like I had a grasp of what was happening. And then COVID hit. And 8 days into lockdown, I lost my little brother to suicide. And losing him and the grief and the circumstances of that was the only time in my life that I ever actually wanted to die, that I ever actually experienced suicidal ideation, despite having mental health conditions for 10 years at that point. When we think about mental health, the statistic is 1 in 5 people have a diagnosable mental health condition, have a diagnosable mental illness. But 5 in 5 people have mental health. If you've had a bad day and you're feeling stressed out or just kind of run down, that is mental health. If you've had a great day and you're feeling excited and active and energized, that is mental health. That is something that every single one of us experiences. And to your point, when we are in circumstances that are harmful, when we are in circumstances that are difficult to navigate or that are causing us to be in pain or to experience trauma, having a reaction that is akin to depression, akin to anxiety, akin to whatever mental health condition, that is actually just normal emotional processing. But because we don't talk about those two as distinct from each other, we conflate them together as like, if you're struggling with your mental health, you have a mental illness, full stop. That really turns people off from being able to engage with identifying with struggling in whatever capacity, and then from feeling validated and being able to seek help. You know, people feel like you can't engage with mental health resources unless you have a mental illness. If you have mental health, which all of us do, you can engage in resources to support that, and you should.
Thank you. Thank you for that great question, and Pooja, for your lived experience. So first of all, I wanted to really give Director Chung a big round of applause for directing such an incredible film, and that is a 5 years in the making and interviewing 15 people over 60 cities, right? And then also, you know, even though I'm listed as a producer of the film, but it's really a community project. So I said, you know, can we list WAVE as producers? And no, it has to be individual. So I want to recognize UCA WAVE. We have, you know, many of the members in the audience here. So, and Ling, obviously. I think that I think the intersectionality of race, of mental health issues, of immigration is such a complex issue, you know. But what struck me, I think the most is that that in the context of parent-child relationship, the parents were just clueless. You know, like I came as a nursing student. So when I was in China, I didn't have any nursing education. I mean, any psychiatric nursing education at all, right? So you think of your nurse. So when I was raising my kids, that wasn't in my vocabulary. I have never we do say I love you. I mean, that part maybe I do, but no, never like, how are you feeling? Like I just said, why are you crying all the time? Yeah. Just like, get up, you know, go play and, you know, do some sports, you're gonna feel better. So I think that is something that, you know, the parents do the best they can, you know, at a time, obviously, right? So that is something we try to do is that we really, really wanted to, like, you know, I think the silver lining is the resilience and the strength of the parents. Look at how powerful they can be when they finally realize, you know, through the lows, you know, of their daughter's suffering, they really became a very, very vocal, this family advocate for mental health to increase their knowledge. I think this is something that just, the soul knowledge is power. It is so powerful.
Okay, I mean, sorry.
Yeah. And thanks, Aline, for that like really wonderful question. I think this is also something, even for myself, going into the mental health field, is that lots of times when I talk about like mental health or therapy, it can seem such an individual thing. And sometimes to some extent it's even like, oh, you are not taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. You are not doing a good job of, you know, self-care and take like, you know, for your mental health. But I think this film shows that, you know, it's both that, like in mental health field, we'll talk about that biopsychosocial, it's all these factors that influence. We don't really know for sure what is the actual cause. There can be many of these things. And I think that's why we need like Dr. Lee and like we do this work in therapy, we also need Pooja, we need Lily, like Waves to do this work that really had the film to kind of talk about doing these more systematic changes. And I think this is the really powerful piece of the film is showing these different factors that it doesn't take, it's only like, I mean, I think these days sometimes people say, oh, just go to see a therapist, but that's only part of the puzzle, right? There are so many other things that we can do. It's like if we only do that self-care, if we don't have that community care, then it's really putting all this pressure on individuals that sometimes can even just worsen the problem. But with like these people who can share their stories and showing like these odd external factors, even today as we're sitting here, as we all receiving these messages about eyes and all these things that are changing, like as individual therapists or coming to this field and like how can I support my clients when we're all facing these things. There's lots of therapists talking about their own mental health and how they don't even feel safe in these spaces themselves and how we can support each other. I think that is why like the conversation like this is so important to really continue to kind of build that power, build that waves that we continue make changes.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a great question, and then also like really kind of want to echo with everybody have shared so far. And one of the things that in the clinical space and over the past over 20 years, and what I see in this country, like as a in the clinical space, is that generational trauma, and in the film, and one of the person also kind of repeatedly talk about trauma, and not only generational trauma, but also particular in the immigrant community, that many of us here are immigrants, and so we came to this country, and in the film too, and bury just so much, right, in terms of pressure and stress, and also trying to survive. I will use the word survive, and especially in the context of ICE today, that we all receive that information, I think speaks very close to our heart. And try to survive and try to make it, right? And try to support the family, and then away from all the resources and community and language, right, cultural that are part of them, and had to, and day in and day out is trying to survive. And that really trickle down to generation, right? That stress. And I want you to kind of like, when we talk about internalized mental health, whether mental health illness, and also resources available. So that's one of the things, that is just keep coming up for me. Like we really need to address in terms of community care, outreach, intervention, and individual care is important, but it's so limited. And one of the reasons that I'm, kind of in my current role, and is because I felt like as a mental health provider, and which I am still in my previous role in the counseling center, and I strive for taking more administrative responsibility, because in the one-on-one intervention, the impact is very meaningful and depth and powerful. But also, I know that when a client's sitting in front of me, there's a whole system that is contributing to what the students or what the clients are struggling with. And then the parents are not in the room, the community is not in the room, right? The entire family and also societal system not being addressed. And so what I love about what WAVE and also what all of you are doing, and then also this event's really addressing that community needs. Very powerful.
Great. Thank you so much. And maybe we should just maybe open up for questions or comments, or, one thing that, this is a small part of the film, but I found really touching was towards the end, as Sandy and her family are reconciling, that it was also a story, like you mentioned language, yeah, that she was also communicating with her parents in Chinese. So I feel like there's a kind of Asian American narrative that is everybody needs to learn to be American. Yeah. And I really love that this love and caring was going both ways, right? Mm-hmm. That her parents, were learning her language, but she was also learning theirs. And it was just a really lovely moment. But questions or comments or for our panelists? Yes, sure. Do you want to? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Wang. I'm a high school teacher. I teach Chinese at Durham Academy. I'm also the assistant director of DEI there. Thanks for being vulnerable to share your experience. Thanks for pronouncing the generational trauma. I'm teaching 2 classes right now, and one of the 2 classes is Chinese heritage class. So most of my students, they are second generation immigrant. They were born here in America. They were born in immigrant families. So I visibly see this generational trauma or generational communications or miscommunications between their generation, their parents' generation. And I every year when I have this back to school night, the first parent night, facing their parents, there's always, I always begged them. I'm begging your time to accept 2 requests from me. The first request is, please don't judge your children's Chinese work. No matter how bad it is, right? No matter how bad their handwriting is, no matter how disorganized their essay is, when you get a chance to read, when you get a chance to see their writing, to read about their essay, to hear their oral recordings, please don't judge them. Let me do the judging and you do the compliment part. If you can do that, that's going to be so much helpful. Having your children sitting in this class with me, it means a lot to them, it means a lot to me, but I need your help in making this everything work. And then another request, I'm like, please ask them about the topics that we talk in class. And I, like, time to time, I share the topics with them so that they can have those conversations at home. So to me, that class is more like, it's not only educating the students, it's also this parent is a part of it, because there are so many times when I sat down with a parent one-on-one, it triggered me because I just felt like I was speaking to this Indian male version of my mom, or this Vietnamese female version, again, of my mom, that I'm telling them how great their children have been doing in my class, and then all they want to hear is, tell me one thing they need to improve, right? I literally just had this 45-minute parent-teacher conference last week with one student's mom, and all the entire 45 minutes were speaking Chinese. It was lovely. She's very sweet. She's very kind. And I told her everything that her son did well in my class, the improvement he had from his 9th grade to 11th grade. And of course, she wants to know what he can do better. So I shared one thing out of this 100 things that he did well. And I said, well, he can pay attention more in class, just a little more. And the next day I asked the student, what did your mom say about our meeting, our conference? And he said, she said I need to work harder. Yeah. I'm like, okay, so she just skipped all the 40 minutes, all the 43 minutes of me bragging about you, and just only shared that 1 minute of this, right, critical feedback. Great, but let me tell you that I bragged about you. I told her all about your shining part, like all the progress you've made, and she was nodding along. So I want you to know that she heard me saying that you are doing a great job. She was holding that to herself. She didn't share that with you, but I can guarantee you that she heard that. So that generational thing that you just mentioned is real. It's happening every single day. It's happening, and I'm telling everyone in this room, I can push my students' parents to open up the conversation. I still cannot face my own mom. I'm still having that with my own situation. So this is it's going to be a lifelong journey of understanding, especially for the first generation immigrant. We all are overcoming this imposter syndrome. We are pushing so hard on ourselves, and then we just carry that spirit on, and then we do a very bad role modeling for the next generation. And they see that how we are so harsh on ourselves, and they do that too to themselves. And we don't recognize each other's growth. We don't recognize each other's achievements. So I think if we have one takeaway from that, if any of you who happen to have your younger or older generation at home, maybe spend some time just to compliment each other for one thing that you did very well. Good job on this week's. Yeah, I feel like that will help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One of the funny, I taught Everything Everywhere All at Once a couple years ago, and one of the things my students said is so funny, and it was actually not an Asian student, a Latina student, and she was saying that she watched a movie and understood that her mom has always said to her, I will never raise you the way my parents raised me, and I will never impose those unrealistic expectations on you. And then my student wrote a forum post about how I suddenly realized that my mom exactly raises me that my grandmother raised her. But the difficult part is that she has this intergenerational trauma, but she can't see it. Yeah. And even though she consciously wants to avoid it, but she still says exactly the same things that her grandma says to her mother. But comments, questions, Yeah, sure. You can pass it back. Thank you.
Wait, I wanted to speak on the language difference as a second generation kid. I grew up in Ohio, so not too much of an Asian community, but I grew up learning Chinese and I've been getting more and more fluent. But as I grew up, I learned there are still very much key differences in the cultural context, because as we were talking about in the film, like how Chinese is very much a contextual language, and you will never say like "I love you" unless someone's probably dying. You know, like of my mom said "I love you" in Chinese, I'd be like, "Oh my god, like what happened?" But like, there's things that I learned growing up. So it's like whenever I was crying, my mom would say "你怎么了," right? As in like, "Oh, what's wrong?" But I always took it as "what's wrong with you," because
Yeah.
你怎么了 sounds like direct translation. And there's like my friend I know, like he would get complimented as like 不错. But surrounded by white children who get complimented like, good job, wow, we're so proud of you. You don't get complimented like that as a Chinese child. You get at most like a 不错, or like a, oh, 又读 A 了, okay, 还行. You know, like it's very much like a, okay, you've been doing it checklist, keep going, you know. So like when you grow up in an America individualized culture where you're expected to think that your parents are supposed to say I love you, but they don't know how to express that to you in a way that you understand. There's an almost unbridgeable generational and cultural divide. And in this kind of context where you're supposed to think of immigrating to America as a unilaterally good thing, maybe not in these years, but like before, they feel almost as if there's no room to complain about like this kind of like psychological trauma of immigration, this kind of cultural and language divide. So there's very little room to speak about these issues, either for the parents or for us, the children. So
No,
I really like that we're opening the space.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. I think that's fabulous. And I was going to say that I'd love to hear when you in clinical work or working in your various groups, how is something that you know exactly that point. You know, how do you address these kinds of almost, I wouldn't call them cultural divides, almost linguistic. I think I like that you framed it as a linguistic device, which I think, a difference, which I think is true, right? I actually don't tell my kids in Chinese they're great in Chinese either. I also say 不错, right? Because it's just weird. But in English, I probably say, you did great. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you brought that up, and I think this kind of goes back to the way that like our parents treat us as well, where, I've definitely had that experience where I'm talking to my friends and we're all I'm hearing them all say how their parents are never proud of them and they're never doing enough and whatever, and I'm like, really? Because my parents keep telling me how your parents are talking about how great you are, right? So it's like all of us are just kind of in this vacuum where we're not enough for our parents, but they're bragging to everybody else about us. So for me growing up, I grew up here in the Triangle in the South Asian community here. And I was constantly in spaces, I was very involved in my temple and the youth group and the dance groups and the religious practices. I was also on the gymnastics team. I was also, in a very white school in Raleigh. And so I was constantly in spaces where I was either not Indian enough or not American enough. And, part of what made it really challenging for me to be able to really engage with care was that I wasn't entirely sure what identity allowed for me to have a mental health condition, right? Because in the eyes of American culture, I was the stereotypical Indian Asian girl who always succeeded and got the good grades and did all the things. And in the Indian spaces, we just don't have words for mental illness or anxiety or hearing voices in your head. We just don't do that. So I wasn't enough for either of these spaces. I couldn't identify for either of these spaces. And it was really only when I was able to create my own identity of Indian American and define what that means for me, was I really able to lean into everything that comes with that. The way that I dress, the way that I move in the world, the foods that I eat, the language that I use, and the identities that I hold, including someone with direct lived experience of a mental health condition. I think one of the things that to your point, we really don't talk about when we're talking about the mental health of our communities is the impact of being a hyphenated American. There's a lot of expectation that's put on us by other members of our community within the Asian spaces, by the external, like broader American community, and then back from our families and our relationships in our home country, trying to tell us what our identity should be. You are Indian, you are American, and that means this and this means that, and you need to follow these guidelines. I really want to see conversations that allow for the communities that we have here to identify for themselves, to define for themselves, what does this hyphenated identity mean for you, right? Because whether you came here as an adult from another country, whether you came here from a child of another country, whether you were born to immigrants here, whether you were born to second generation identities here, the way that you carry your culture and the values and the practices that come with that and integrate it into this broader ecosystem that we are all a part of, it is going to look different from the people around you. And I really wish that we were able, and I'm really proud of like the people on this panel for the work that we're doing to move towards defining identity in a way that is, it looks different for every single person, but it's rooted in an authenticity that feels genuine to yourself rather than like adhering to these parameters of what other people want to define it for you.
That's really well said. Good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the, kind of coming back to what you said, ask the question in terms of, what do you see in the clinical space, right? When we, so when I work with many second generation Asian American students on college campus, and so often, the generation conflicts and misunderstanding, trauma, and layered of mental health concerns, and whether it's the student or the family member, and all that shows up in the clinical space. And then identity, like Pooja says, and identity, like exploring what it means to be Asian American, right? The second generation or third generation. And then what it means in the, being that Asian American and student on this campus, where, kind of in the society or in your family, and all that. I really have to spend a lot of time unpack, because when clients coming into the space, and what normally trigger them to come into counseling is some symptoms, right? So kind of like, I feel anxious, I'm sad, I'm struggling with academically, I have relationship issues. And then when you go on and unpack what's going on and underneath, oftentimes also there are some family systems and issue. And then for the parents here, so I'm also a parent, so I have two kids, and 11 and 15, and then they're in their teens and preteen, and so like the firsthand experience raising a second generation Asian American teens, it really humbles me so much. And I think what I in the film, and the one of the lady girl I was talking about, like that sense of being seen and heard and felt that kind of a connection. I think that's what really, as a parent, that I constantly remind myself. And I read, I learn, I continue to really refresh and reminds myself, okay, when you're in that parenting role, it's so hard to not being triggered by the system, by the, when your child is having a meltdown or having some kind of emotional challenges, and it's hard not to get triggered. And it's so the first thing as a parent, I constantly remind myself, and as a therapist, right? So, first ground yourself and take care of yourself, connecting to what's going on here and now, and hold whatever that is, and then you are there for your kids, for the client and whoever, right? And you soothe them, and that connection is the fundamental to much more depth than success and academic grades, and so nothing comes, everything comes after that connection, a human relationship.
Lily, did you want to say? Yeah.
I don't think I need to add more of that, but I do want to mention the first national study by the Asian American Foundation. It's called the Beyond the Service, that we were just at their summit, at the first Youth Mental Health Summit. So that study reviewed many startling numbers and facts, especially related to identity and mental health illness. So we have a hard copy at the table. You can take a look, and that's number one. Number two will be, you all talk about community resources, right? So I think that at the end of the day, I think everybody left, right? So what I'm gonna do? We all know this, right? Systematic factors, racism, language barrier, intergenerational differences, trauma, conflict, right? So what we do is try to know that, from the film, there is hope, right? There's a lot of things to unpack, layers and layers. But I just want to let you know that there are hope, but we as parents and as children as well, right? Like I said, we did the best we can at the time. And the children too, I think that, we have never been parents before, right? We have never, this is the only thing that we never learn in school, So, and the children as well, there's tremendous love between them. And they really, really wanted to build that relationship. That's, I think, the strength in our, the community. So lean on to that, just like lean on to that. And then it's going to get better. And then there's a book that I'm reading right now. It's called Permission to Come Home by Dr. Jenny Wang. It was wonderful. I would just encourage like parents, or usually the parents, I'm sorry, right? That really just like be curious and learn and be open to learn of each other's language.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's so beautifully said. Oh, I think.
Oh,
did you want to say something?
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to kind of go back to the question about language, and like in that space, like even I'm raising a 3-year-old, so like when I try to teach him about emotions, I cannot use Chinese because I never learned those languages. And also sometimes when I use some of the languages, I feel like it's really, in Chinese we'll call it 肉麻, it just feels very inauthentic, it's very weird. But this is also something I've been thinking is like in therapy work, and also just thinking about therapy and the theories we're learning, the mental health field is very westernized. Right, like there are not enough people talking about like even how we show care, how we show love in Asian culture is very different. But how we can still foster those things. It's not that there's only one way to be adaptive, to be like healthy, and how we kind of redefine that. It's not like we have to all follow this westernized way that's the only path to be healthy, to be mentally well. But then I think for us as practitioners, it's also thinking about how to bring in these things, how to really, even though we're learning all these Western theories and then speaking English, even in sessions when we use, like I talk a lot of Chinese therapists, they're like, yeah, we have to use both. Like sometimes you have a lot of code switch because you don't have the language in Chinese. But then what does that even mean for when we work with Chinese clients, and what does even like mental wellness or well-being looks for them? I think this is something the whole field was still kind of trying to figure out. And I think that even me in the space, like in my program, I'm the only immigrant, I'm the only Chinese in my program, and then sometimes that space can be really lonely, right? Don't have people to talk about, to think about these things. For others, they take these for granted. That's how they show love, that's how they show care. But it's not the same when we will go back to work with our clients, with our communities. And I think there's need more, I think there's just a lot of more work that we need to do, but there's also hope there. And I do want to mention one thing, I think just talks to the hope. So one of the picture books that I read with my son, we got those from the Dolly Parton free library, and one of the book is called How We Say I Love You. So it's written by a Taiwanese artist, and then talks about in her family they show love through action, through the grandma making food, through her. I don't know if any of you read that book. I think that's really great way to kind of start these conversations, to even let us kids know, right? Saying I love you is not the only way that I show I love you. Through other stories, through other ways, like even though I may never say that, but the care is still there. And to really kind of reframe it as, oh, my parents never say I love you. They never say I'm proud of you, that's not a healthy way. That can still be healthy, and there's just kind of that mutual, bi-directional work that goes from like both generations. I just want to add that.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. And I just want to say how grateful I am to have you all in the community. So I'm also an immigrant. I came here for college, and I remember going to therapy, I think maybe like my first or second year of grad school. I rambled on about something, and the therapist said, oh, your parents, have treated you terribly or something like that. I'm like, no, they're just normal parents. I'm actually here about something else. but I felt like precisely that I was being pathologized for. But I loved also what Pooja said earlier because I am now raising children who are hyphenated in all sorts of interesting ways. And I forget that as an immigrant, even though immigrants go through a lot of trauma in all ways that we've seen, in this show, in this film, but I have a lot of linguistic certainty because I grew up speaking the language, and then I acquired a second language and third and stuff. But my kids have that, and I love what Bonnie said, right? So sometimes I do kind of mock my kids for their Chinese, right? But I love that I recognize that a hyphenated identity or someone who's a heritage learner has a very different relationship to the languages in their lives and the identities in their lives that I kind of take for granted because I kind of started with one, right? Yeah. And so I really appreciate all the work that all of you do, and as parents and as children, as members of the community. And our official time has really come to an end, but I'm sure maybe some informal conversations can continue. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending the evening with us.